Michael Banks and his team of carefully selected hunters had been searching a town called Lyndhurst for active zombies, and have been left baffled as to why they haven't found at least one, only dead ones with their heads missing.
What happened to them?
Rachel asked Michael whilst looking for clues, knowing her answer was as good as his.
I don't know. Somebody got to them before us by the looks of things.
So what do we do now?
Amanda, the flasher asked.
Same procedure we go through every dwelling, checking for active savages, but be on your guard at all times. This could be a civilian scavenger trap we're walking into.
Michael explained, but was quickly interrupted by an elderly woman who came running out from a nearby house, screaming her head off whilst holding a shotgun. Amazingly, she took everyone by surprise, and without anyone challenging her, she managed to get close enough to point her gun inches away from Michael's head.
Drop your guns and swords, assholes, or the good-looking guy gets a facelift.
She shouted, almost causing her false teeth to fly out her mouth.
Lower your killing machine, lady. You're outgunned. There's 40 of us. You can't possibly win this.
Michael tried his best to defuse the standoff.
I will give you all 10 seconds to put down your weapons. After that, I'll start shooting.
The great granny demanded, as Michael stood staring down her gun's barrels, which seemed rather close to his face, whilst her dentures were dangling out one side of her mouth. But despite being outnumbered, she meant business and wasn't just talking to exercise her vocal cords.
Do as the woman says and drop your weapons.
He ordered his men and women to stand down, for he wasn't saying things for the fun of it either.
Now that's better.
She said before asking.
Would you mind telling me what the hell you're all doing here?
We mean you no harm. We're just a band of zombie hunters passing through.
Well, you're ever so late for that. No savages will come back here.
You can't say that for certain.
Haven't you heard about the beast? You do know you're not the only ones hunting the undead.
She gestured before shoving her dentures back into her mouth and adjusting them into their correct position with her tongue, as the somewhat bewildered Michael stood pondering her statement. He knew she was referring to the piles of bodies, murdered and burnt.
What are you talking about, lady?
The beast, he was here 2 days ago, pissed as a bat out of hell, swinging his shovel around, ripping up zombies like they were made of paper, before executing the cats and the dogs, too.
She paused to catch her breath. Seconds later, she smiled, and it was with a great emphasis she delivered her next statement.
Oh yeah, I nearly forgot. He murdered my husband, too.
I'm sorry to hear that, lady, but why did he kill your companion? Was he a zombie?
No, he wasn't. But that beast didn't give a shit and killed him for the fun of it.
How could you just say something like that? He was your partner.
Well, it's not like I cared for the guy. In fact, I don't even know why I married him. But at least I got my freedom back.
She smiled as the puzzled flasher stared at her, thinking to herself.
What bloody independence is she talking about? The 100-plus-year-old frail woman might be dead in the next couple of days, and it's not like she can get herself a toy boy looking like that. What did this beast look like?
Rachel interrupted, asking a significant question.
I'm not certain. He attacked during the night, killing everything and everyone. Plus, I wasn't wearing my glasses. But I'll try my best to describe to you what I could make out. He wore a light brown gorilla suit and stood around 8 feet tall, and his feet were like skateboards.
Well, that's just great. So now we're looking for a basketball player, dressed as a primate that enjoys swinging a shovel about and riding a bloody skateboard.
Michael suggested, shaking his head in disbelief while trying ever so hard to keep his cool. The lady's lost the plot, he convinced himself under his breath, whilst Rachel smiled, holding out a hand to comfort her.
You've been through a lot. Put the gun aside and come back with us. We'll look after you. We've got months of food plus shelter waiting for you.
No thanks, sweetheart. I fight better alone.
The great-grandma insisted.
We will pick up our weapons, turn around and flee. Try not to do anything silly, and for Christ's sake, lady, take good care of yourself,
said Michael, addressing the fearless granny whilst feeling reluctant to leave her. They both smiled at each other for a brief moment, but as she turned around to go back to where she'd come from, he shook his head, refusing to believe her courageous stubbornness. Melinda and Roger had played a significant role in destroying the active zombies 2 nights ago in Brockenhurst. And when it was all over, they stayed behind to make sure the savages never retake the town. Melinda O'Donovan Hong, also known as Melinda the Ninja, is a 37-year-old fiery redhead lady from an Irish descent who lost her mother and father in a bomb attack which took the life of an Irish ambassador in Belfast, the largest city in Northern Ireland. She was just 3.5 at the time, and according to an eyewitness, she was standing by her parents composing herself into position to watch the Easter parade, with no way of knowing they'd all be standing in the wrong place, as the ambassador's limousine suddenly exploded upon passing them by. Mum and Dad died within seconds, but she was sent flying into a young couple's back garden, who were originally from Japan, and known to the locals as Mr. and Miss Hong. They'd been living in Ireland for 4 years, and trying to make a baby for the last 2. A top doctor and leading consultant had recently given them the bad news, expressing that after months of what seemed like endless treatment for Miss Hong, they had no chance of conceiving or giving birth to a child, causing them to abandon their efforts to become biological parents. A few days before hearing a commotion coming from their back garden, contributing to them both investigating, something had whistled whilst falling from the sky. Well, they'd convinced themselves that was the case, as they expected to find a huge crater or maybe some sort of unexploded missile. But unto both their surprises, they received the biggest shock of their lives, discovering a young toddler suspended in the air, holding onto their washing line with one hand, while maintaining a firm grip on her toy Ninja Turtle with the other. She had a lollipop in her mouth and was trying her best to pull off a cute smile, like she'd been posing for a fashion shoot. Seconds later, Mrs. Hong quickly took her down and saw the name Melinda written on the back of the dummy her parents had placed around her neck.
Hello, Melinda,
she said as the toddler belched, sneezed, smiled and broke wind at the same time, before holding out her right hand to offer Mr. Hong her toy Ninja Turtle. Mr. Hong was once a ninja warrior himself and accepted the toddler's offering as a sign from his ancestors.
We must take this girl to Japan to undergo ninja training. I must teach her the way of our forefathers to become an exceptional fighter,
he said to his wife.
if what you're saying is true, when we hand her over to the authorities, they'll let us keep her.
The couple took Melinda to the local police station, but after an appeal for the family of her deceased parents to come forward and claim her, went wrong. They put her up for adoption, and after months of negotiations, the Hong couple adopted Melinda. Within weeks, they took her to Japan, and half a year later she'd embark in self-defense training for under fives before moving on to hand and stealth combat workout, which was done in top secrecy. At the maturing age of just 18, she'd passed a mock assassin test with flying colours and ended up working for the government, and by the time she turned 21, she bagged her first kill, and it was from that day onwards the well-educated red-headed killer, Melinda the Ninja, was born. Roger Doyle, also known as Roger the Dodger, is a self-confessed, come-out-the-closet, undocumented migrant from Jamaica who somehow smuggled himself into England, with help from the French authorities who put him onto a Eurostar train after he arrived in France. From the age of just 18, he'd spent most of his adult life living in a South London flat, whilst working the streets of Brixton, wheeling and dealing everything from drugs to human trafficking, digital watches and fridge freezers, TV sets and washing machines, you name it, and he sold it. He was also a henchman for a notorious London gang and enjoyed torturing people for either missing a payment or deciding they weren't paying anymore. The skeptics used to say he was an ignorant, evil bastard, and if he'd planned a home visit with you for a cup of tea and a slice of cake or friendly chit-chat about the weather, you do yourself a big favour and leave the country as soon as possible. For he was the type of fella that would pour petrol over a bloke and set him alight, and while he was burning, give him a good kick up the privates to make sure he was in pain and weren't actually enjoying himself. For years, the police tried in vain to bring Roger the Dodger to justice, using everything they could within their powers, but each time they arrested him, they'd let him go, either through lack of evidence or individuals making ridiculous statements. While standing in the dock at the Old Bailey, people swore Roger was elsewhere when the crime or crimes were committed. All of the London gangs paid homage to him for the way he could duck and dodge himself out of trouble. And the skeptics argued that Roger was the only man on the planet that could fall in a pile of elephant dung bigger than he was and get up smelling of red and white roses. You just couldn't catch him out. May Day was when the undead cannibals breached London in their thousands, changing it to Z-Day, giving themselves a bloody good reason to celebrate. Roger the Dodger had been busy at work interrogating a police officer, but had to abandon his job freeing PC Dixon of Dock Green Police Station from his makeshift torturing chair, for he'd received a text message via his iPhone, 77 plus 2.5 mobile phone. The zombies have arrived, which was more than enough for Roger to hand his jerk chicken sandwich over to the young law enforcement officer and run towards home as fast as he could. Minutes later, he'd galloped himself to exhaustion and was a few seconds away from passing out at the roadside when he successfully hailed and flagged down a speeding taxi, but had to beat up the driver for failing to part with his vehicle. After picking 2 bits of teeth out of his right hand, he started the engine and drove at record speed, trying to gain back the time he'd lost negotiating a deal on the cab he'd illegally purchased. He was fast and furious, weaving in and out of the traffic and turning corners on 2 wheels, but arrived at his destination too late. The nights he'd been out partying with strippers and sophisticated ladies had taken a toll on him, reducing his six-pack to a 1 which wobbled as he walked. The skeptics argued among themselves before agreeing that if he only knew how to say no to a beautiful lady, leading him up the garden path wearing nothing but her high heels and mini-skirt. Like the 2 blonde-headed females seen with him the night before, that took all his money and drained his energy too. He would have reached home in time to save his family. Instead, he arrived to witness them being eaten alive by a bunch of savages.
No.
He shouted with a bit of an echo, like in one of those Hollywood films, before opening fire with his semi-automatic handgun, emptying a full round before loading and firing again, only to realise how heavily outnumbered he was, and whilst down to his last bullet, the zombies approached him slow and furious. The threat of being eaten alive was not an option and non-negotiable, he said unto himself, placing the barrel from his gun under his chin. He was less than a few seconds away from pulling the trigger when the living room window came crashing in, accompanied by a loud noise. For a minor explosion had taken place, causing bits of wood and glass to come raining down, littering 2 Persian rugs, destroying the family sofas and his grandfather's cuckoo clock too, causing Roger and the zombies to immediately stop fighting and stand by each other's side as if on the same team, staring at where the giant window used to be, thinking to themselves, what the hell? Just as a red-headed female leapt through, landing on a blood-stained rug, seconds later she drew a sword, sharp enough to shave them. And as the savages were licking their lips and thinking to themselves, wow, she looks tasty, she began slashing and chopping them into pieces. The frenzied attack was over in a matter of minutes. The redhead woman had killed at least 20 zombies and was about to leave the same way she came in when Roger the Dodger shouted,
Wait, gal, you just saved my life and I don't even know your name?
I'm Melinda, but my friends call me Melinda the Ninja.
That's a beautiful title.
Thank you, but I have to go now. More monsters to kill and more lives to save.
You know I'll go anywhere without me.
It's too risky for you, plus I prefer to work alone.
Me not ask you, lady. Me I tell you. Me not leave you until I've at least returned the favor. If you still want to go your way after that, so be it.
You refuse to take no for an answer.
That's right, lady. So do we have ourselves a deal?
Okay, let's do it.
she replied, handing Roger one of her swords. A year later, Melinda and Roger had fallen crazy in love with each other and have become inseparable ever since. They've been doing everything together, well, except use the restroom. But then again, who knows, the skeptics have argued.